Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today it is the 18th of May, 2022. And on today's show, it is a two-parter. If you're watching on YouTube, on audio, on podcast platforms, it'll just be one part together. This is part one here. We're going to discuss wide receivers in the Big 12 heading into 2022. Who are the best five in the league? And then maybe talk about a little bit of ranking them. We'll have some more definitive rankings later on in the week, but we'll look at the top five wide receivers in the Big 12 in the first part of this video. Then the second video that we're going to end up putting up here today is going to be about the CBS Sports coaching rankings. They ranked all 65 Power 5 coaches, and a lot of Big 12 coaches, 6 of them, fell between 30 and 65. So we'll have some reaction to that in the second video. But this one, it's all about the wideouts.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here. Once again, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Make sure you guys find us on Twitter at LOBig12. You guys can find me at Josh Neighbors _. Find the show wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. All right. So today's, this version, at least this video, we're going to do two of them today. This video is going to focus on the wide receivers in the Big 12. And we talked about running backs and how much the Big 12 conference had lost last year in the running back category. And it was a whole heck of a lot. Wide receiver, there were some losses, but not really as many as you would think. There are still a lot of heavy hitters in this conference at the wide receiver position. And so I think when you begin to think about, okay, this year could be a year where the quarterbacks end up stepping up big time. And I think this is kind of going to be more of a quarterback year. Just, I think there's more talent at quarterback in this conference spread about the conference a little bit more. And so I think that paired with a returning group of, a lot of wide receivers could make for a pretty solid year for some of these guys. Now, the guys we did lose, Tay Martin over 1,000 yards last year, Tyquan Thornton 948 yards last year, Charlie Kolar, obviously tight end, and I think he falls into the pass catching, that mold. Eric Ezekama is gone as well. Winston Wright, Kwame Lassiter are all leaving, and so there is that's just a few of the guys who are gone, but there are still a lot of players left that are excellent wide receivers. And so I think this list, any list that we do, and I'm not going to list them in order right now, but I think if we think about any top five, one guy we're sure that's going to be in there is going to be Xavier Worthy. If you look at the top returning receivers in all of college football, like look at a lot of lists, just people think's going to be the best. Xavier Worthy is up there basically for everybody. Last year, had a really nice season, had 62 receptions for 981 yards, and he had 12 touchdowns on the year, 4 100-plus yard receiving games. And I just went back and I was watching some of his tape, and, he's a really good athlete. He's really fast. I think when we all watched that screen pass that he took against Oklahoma to the house, basically for the first offensive play at Texas had or whatever it was, you're blown away immediately. Okay, this guy can win a foot race. But when you really go and watch him on the tape, this is a guy that did a lot of great work, especially in the slot. And his mix of talent and productivity puts him at the top. I mean, it really does. You watched last year, and look, he did it with the kind of a circling, a cycle, I should say, of quarterbacks last season. And you go and you watch, and it's just, he caught passes from both Casey Thompson and Hudson Card. And last year, I thought there were a couple great examples of him. His route running was really good. There's a couple in the Texas Tech game where he just runs some sublime routes, and the defense has no chance. And you can just tell, a second into the route, he's clear, he's free, and then he just keeps going, finishing the route really well. And just making sure he puts himself in position is a good job locating the football. I thought another thing that he did really well last season was yards after contact. Don't have the numbers specifically, but if you go back and watch the tape, This guy broke a lot of tackles. He's a tough guy to bring down and has the ability once he breaks a tackle to not just, keep taking guys on, but to find an angle and to, create another 10, 15 yards after breaking a tackle or two. So I think he is a really special talent. And it's not the speed that blows me away. Once again, like it's a lot of the technique stuff. Like this is a guy that for a young age thought did a lot of things well. Now, obviously, has some stuff to work on. You could be a bit more physical, I guess you could say, in like the jump ball situation. I actually thought he had a couple nice ones last year, but just continuing to grow in that category. And I think he gives them an excellent outlet. I think it's a guy that whenever he touched the ball was money last year. And so any list starts with him. You think of the big games he had: 3 touchdown game against KU, 4 catches for 115 in a score against Baylor, 9 for 261 and 2 scores against OU, 5 for 100 and 3 scores against Texas Tech. I mean, this guy was a big game, big play machine, and had 3 multi-touchdown games last year, 2 3-touchdown games last year. And this is a guy who's maybe he doesn't do that this season. I bet he does, but I think he's going to be an excellent part of that offense. And the focal point, I think we all believe at wide receiver, it's going to be him. Also, they used him some sweeps and stuff in the backfield that kind of looked like carries, but weren't carries. The stuff where it's tossed forward, technically a passing play. So I would say this one with him is pretty inarguable. At he's probably gonna be number 1 on my list once I make the list. But as a top 5 guy, if we're figuring out who the top 5 wide receivers are, he's there for sure. Number 2, if you want to argue about who number 2 is, that's fine. I'm once again just listing the guys that I think that will be on this list, and I'll rank them 1 through 5. I went with Xavier Hutchinson. Okay, I went with him to be in this list. He's in this list for sure. 83 receptions for 987 yards and 5 touchdowns last year. Great size, good hands, good production, strong red zone target as well. They used him a lot down there. He's going to be a guy who plays on Sundays. Probably not somebody that's going to be picked in that first round, obviously. Who knows, maybe he explodes this year. But I think Xavier Hutchinson obviously was going to be on this list. And I think a lot of people were surprised when he decided not to go to the NFL draft. But to me, I think he's a guy who still has room to grow. He's only played 2 years at the D1 level. Went to Blinn College, I think is where he transferred in from. But, you see him with those 2 seasons and did have some games that were questionable, but still had some great games. That Oklahoma State game, he was a monster against one of the best defenses in all of America last year, 12 for 125 and 2 scores. There were some games they didn't really get in the ball enough. The Baylor game, only 4 for 42, 3 for 22 in that loss to Iowa against Clemson. It was 1 for 34. There were some games where he did disappear at times, but also had some pretty big games as well. Once again, 6'3", 210. He's got really good size, good catch radius, and he's just a target that I think is going to 110% be a safety blanket this year for a guy like a Hunter Deckers, who is going to be taking over that starting role, we think, full time. No amazing tight end. They lose Chase Allen and Charlie Kolar, but when you think about, okay, who's the next guy to step up? Well, that's the guy, right? I know he's not the tight end that we usually think of tight ends as the safety blankets, but I think Xavier Hutchinson's going to be the guy that Hunter Deckers looks at a lot just because of his experience, his quality of play, his size, his ability. I think that puts him very much on this list. So I have him in there, and he's just the second guy I thought of. Number 3, and I know Oklahoma fans might be mad, I'm not at Marvin Mims just yet. Quentin Johnston. When we think about guys in this next draft class, and Xavier Worthy can't go, but guys in the Big 12 who have a chance to go as high wide receivers, Quentin Johnston is the first guy that you have to think about. Last year, his productivity, 33 catches, 612 in the yards department, 6 touchdowns, and he only played in 8 games last season. So he was on pace for around 900 yards and 9 touchdowns last year. And this was an offense that was, he can't show what he's, in the intermediate, like the route running and all that kind of stuff. I feel like because their intermediate passing game is so challenged. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to big plays down the field, this guy is one of the more unstoppable players. And it's like low catch numbers, but big output. 5 for 95 and 2 scores against Cal. 7 for 185 and 3 against Oklahoma. 5 for 113 against West Virginia. 5 for 142 and a score against Baylor. Did have some low output games, but I'm going to say it's on more quarterback play And we know that Sonny Dykes does have a pass happier offense. So I think that's going to create more chances for a guy like Quentin Johnston to catch the football in big spots and situations where he can do more, and also show off a bit more of the intermediate, the intermediate game for him. But I think this guy is a talented guy who was limited by the talent around him last year. A lot of changing things, a lot of swirling things last year. There's a lot of change this year too. But I think if they can get the quarterback thing a bit more consistent, Quentin Johnson, number one target in that team, the best offensive weapon they have, I think, by far. And so I think he's going to have a big year. And look, NFL scouts, they love the size that Johnston has. 6'4", 201. So big guy, maybe, not obviously huge in the weight, but can still move at 6'4", 201. So I think for him, this is something that, this is a year I think he's going to have a big one. I don't think there's any debate. He's got to be on this list too. The last guy with no debate on this list, I think, is Marvin Mims. Now, look, I don't have him. I think where he comes down will be an interesting thing. Not a guy with the size that everybody else has, especially Xavier Hutchinson and Quentin Johnston, but 5'11", 177. He is going into year number 3 that have the COVID year. Last year, 37 catches, 6'10", 9 touchdowns for him. And this is somebody that I think we maybe thought would have a little bit of a bigger, he still had a nice year, still had a really nice year. Maybe a little bit bigger year than this, maybe 1,000-yard year or close to that. I know it's hard to do. But, that Texas game, he was unbelievable. Texas Tech game, a lot of people, ripped them to shreds. Had a nice game against Oregon. But, against Oklahoma State, had a rough game. Against Iowa State, had a rough game. Against Baylor, had a rough game, right? So I'm listing you off the better defenses. West Virginia, had a rough game. Like some of the better defenses in this conference, he did not have a lot of great games. And so Marvin Mims, definitely on this list, deserves to be on this list, the physical tools to be on this list. But I'm looking for him to take a step forward this year, and I think he will if he can build that chemistry with Dylan Gabriel. No doubt he's going to be a top target. That is 110% sure. You can book that he is going to be a top target going into this season. And then number 5, there's a variety of ways that you can go on this list. For me, I think it came down to 2 guys. I think it came down to Brennen Presley, and I think it came down to Bryce Ford-Wheaton. So that is kind of where I am between these two, and I really don't know which direction I'm going to go in when I do my final one, but just trying to think about who's vying for that last spot. Presley is not a big guy. He's just 5'8", 175, but proved to be really effective and had a monster game. His only 100-plus yard game of the year was last year against Notre Dame. I think because, and I don't want to penalize him for, I don't want to penalize him, but I actually had a huge game against Iowa State too, and thought he got that first down. It's besides the point though. But, I'm not going to penalize Bryce Ford-Wheaton, I think, for the bad quarterback play last year. I just think it's somebody that this year is going to have poised to have a big season. But look, it's kind of coming down to, wait, what is this list? Is this list ranking who the best guys going in next year, or the guys who might have the biggest season because of the situation that they're in? So I think it comes down to Bryce Ford-Wheaton, who is a size guy, 6'3", 220, and had a nice year last year, but obviously, once again, a guy who was limited by some of the quarterback play. Jared Day, did throw the ball around a lot, but not always, not always most effective guy. I thought their offense was a little bit broken last year. Just didn't really get that run, the mix of the run and the pass correct for most of the year. So I think Bryce Ford-Wheaton and Brennen Presley are going to create a situation where I have to think about, hey, who do I want? But right now, I'll go Bryce Ford-Wheaton. TBD though. So top five heading into next year. We've got Xavier Worthy, Xavier Hutchinson, Quentin Johnston, Marvin Mims, and then Bryce Ford-Wheaton are the top 5 guys that I've got. Xavier Worthy of Texas, Xavier Hutchinson, Iowa State, Quentin Johnston at TCU, Marvin Mims at OU, and then Bryce Ford-Wheaton. In no particular order at this moment in time. We will put them in order here coming up soon. All right, that will do it for this part of the show. One quick word from our sponsors before we get out of here. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to Built.com today. That's Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com today. They've got the birthday cake puffs, which I've just had. I got one right here. Had it for this morning. You might say, Josh, why are you eating dessert for breakfast? I'm not. It is a protein bar. it is okay to have a Built Bar this time. I'm going to go hit a run after I'm done with this show here today. So you guys go check them out. Built.com today, promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15. All right, this is part one if you are watching on video. There'll be a second video out today as well. If you're listening to audio, part two is coming up about the coaches in the conference.